Hello and welcome to ESIT Africa's DESlock Encryption Sales video. Today we're going to be covering a few of the reasons that you typically need to have an encryption solution, some of the prevalent news that's going on in the industry around encryption, some of the hurdles that you could typically encounter in deploying an encryption solution, and of course how our product meets those demands as well as any requirements that you may have. First and foremost, obviously the main point that we want to raise is why would you typically need an encryption solution? Obviously, first and foremost, generally any type of theft is exceedingly common. So obviously any type of laptops or breaking into offices poses a risk to your data and the data of your clients if you're handling it for a business. Secondly, of course, any type of business that has some type of theft of unencrypted or sensitive information could run into all sorts of financial damages as a result of their failure to protect that information and it being stolen in an unencrypted form. And there's a lot of industry statistics available that have basically indicated that when businesses effectively run into those types of financial losses, they also obviously run into a drop in their reputation, because typically people and organizations don't want to do business with a company that isn't keeping their information securely. And of course, over and above all of those factors, the individuals whose data is obviously stolen then run the risk of identity theft and other privacy risks. So obviously those are a few important highlights as to why you would typically need an encryption solution. Next, we're going to cover a few headlines. Probably the most recent of which at the time of this recording is the fact that WhatsApp is added into encryption to their communication services, and obviously there's a number of other messaging platforms that are following suit at this time. Viber is included in there, and obviously there's more and more companies that are following that trend in order to add encryption to their solutions. There was also the case towards the end of last year where Amazon had sent emails to some of their users informing them that their passwords had to be reset as a precautionary measure following a potential data breach or disclosure. Then there's obviously a couple of ongoing battles between the US government and a couple of tech giants, including Apple, Google, and others, where the government effectively are requesting a way to access user information for law enforcement and prosecution purposes. Then in less recent news, there's been a number of massive breaches by various organizations. The Sony Pictures hack is probably one of the most famed, where unencrypted emails between executives, directors, actors, and other employees were made public. Then the US State Department announced in late 2014 that one of their unclassified email systems was compromised, resulting in mails being made public. And a number of industry experts then effectively questioned why even an unclassified system didn't have the same security measures in place, because obviously that effectively serves limited purposes. And then lastly, Penn State Hospital also in 2014 had an unfortunate incident where a lab technician actually sent confidential information using his own email account, which actually resulted in the hospital being hit with a HIPAA fine as a result. So these are just to highlight obviously a couple of things that are happening in the industry, and more importantly towards the bottom there, highlighting that in the case of sensitive information being made public, it could lead to loss in reputation, as we mentioned in the previous slide. It could also result in financial losses or fines, depending on the industry in question. Obviously, financial and health organizations are most subject to some type of fine. Then, what are the typical encryption hurdles that you may encounter trying to deploy a solution? The first item on the list is the inefficient, limited, or no central key management. So here we're talking about solutions where you have to keep jumping through hurdles like sharing passwords, which is obviously inherently insecure and poses its own risks and issues, such as the lack of audit logs to see who did what and where, or where a risk was introduced because a password was shared with a less than trustworthy party. Second is the ineffective mechanisms for secure collaboration. It's obviously very important to have a way to easily share encrypted data between users. And then third, of course, is the human factor and our innate resistance to change. when you deploy a solution enabling customers to use encryption, or in some other circumstances where there's a legal requirement or an organization policy that demands it, it really needs to be easy to use and seamlessly operate without requiring lengthy or complicated additional processes or training. Fourth is effectively covering all your bases. So when you're looking at an encryption solution, it needs to obviously have all the encryption facilities which may be required. These could range from email, file and folder, full disk, virtual disk encryption, and obviously anything else. And then the last point is effectively covered to some extent by the fourth point, but there may also be a need to also delete data securely, which is obviously beyond the encryption aspect, and this could be for policy or legal reasons as well. So how do we deal with this? Obviously our solution is DESlock. A couple of things that I'd like to highlight is firstly, from a design perspective, your DESlock server doesn't have to be exposed to the internet. It doesn't actually even need to be on the same network as your endpoints. Instead, any changes that you make on your enterprise server are synchronized to a proxy server maintained by DESlock themselves. But this effectively just holds metadata and other configuration details, ensuring that you can restrict access to your enterprise server and obviously eliminate that very common attack vector for someone trying to obtain your encryption keys. It's also a multi-tenant solution, so it's great for managed service providers because they can effectively deploy a single instance of the DESlock enterprise server to manage the encryption needs of multiple organizations. It can also pretty much encrypt everything, ranging from email, files and folders. It can also encrypt your text and your clipboard, protecting the workstation or endpoints. It also has virtual disk encryption as well as removable media encryption in the form of both removable devices as well as optical devices. And then lastly, of course, it also has full disk encryption, which is obviously particularly useful for laptops. In the event of a disk then being stolen or a laptop being stolen, someone can effectively pull out that disk and it's really nothing more than a glorified paperweight. Next, DESlock also doesn't necessitate a domain environment, and it can also operate in a mixed environment for particular organizations. So you may have some users on your domain and maybe consultants or some other type of user or device that wouldn't be part of the domain. You can actually use it on both at the same time. There's also a portable encryption facility in the form of DESlock Go, where you can encrypt removable media and still actually encrypt, access the encrypted data on machines that don't have DESlock installed. And then tying into the point that I raised in one of the previous slides, through DESlock, your entire experience is actually quite seamless for the users. Basic context menus and Outlook plugins ensure that minimal training is required, if any at all. And DESlock was obviously built with secure collaboration in mind, so the seamless experience in terms of using DESlock encryption facilities actually extends to the management and the sharing of encryption keys between users and departments as well. The solution also includes a secure file deletion mechanism, which basically repeatedly rewrites over the sectors of a drive, for example, with random cryptographic data in order to ensure that that deleted data is unrecoverable. This can be done using their own cryptographic key method or any of the known US Department of Defense standards that are actually included in the product. So when you delete a file, or rather when you configure the deletion algorithm, you can select any one of those. In terms of pricing, there's a couple of license options available, but it's flexible enough to fit well with small organizations right up to large enterprises, but it's important to note that there is annual billing only. Then, when speaking about the competition, only two major vendors stand out. There are obviously many other encryption solutions out there, but when you're looking at something with a feature set of DESlock in comparison and the facilities that they provide, many of the other vendors are excluded, and that's why the main competition at this time happens to be Symantec and McAfee endpoint encryption products. From a general sales or information perspective, the margins are typically the same as ESET, or whatever your partner margin may be, usually 20%. Trials are available on request, similar to the ESET trials or NFR licenses. So just get a hold of us if you need a trial or NFR license for yourself or your customer. Next, if you're not already aware, we do have a partner wiki now available through wiki.esetafrica.com. Sign up is required and needs to be approved, and you obviously need to provide your partner ID for us to prove that you're a valid partner, after which you'll be actually granted access. This will have everything ranging from data sheets, diagrams, case studies, and other documentation, as well as demo and sales videos. We're obviously adding new content to that on a almost daily basis. Once signed up, please feel free to use the contact page to request specific information or let us know what you want to see most urgently on the wiki. And beyond that, any partner queries can be directed to partners@esetafrica.com. And that's pretty much everything that we wanted to highlight in our DESlock Sales video. And I hope that you found that informative. Thank you.